Matters Financial, Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I hope the weekend was good. We had lots of rain here. Macro thoughts, obviously it's all about oil. Predictably, Brent crude oil plunged as much as 7% to $40.10 after Doha talks collapsed. And I'll put up the image that Javier Blas posted early in the morning. We've rebounded a little. Zambia's Kwacha, about which I must admittedly, I must confess, I made a number of jokes when the president held his prayer rallies, but indeed it has gone from the world's third worst performance in 2015 to the best this year. Home thoughts, let me start with David Yarrow, photographed last year. This was a big morning in the Amboseli. As a huge herd crossed the dry lake, a majestic sight. If you're interested in elephants, the Amboseli is a great place to go. I was reading some John Cheever over the weekend and I came across this sentence: Marcie, Marcie, my love, I will shelter her with the curve of my body from all the harms of the dark. Cheever again, for lovers, touch is metamorphosis. All the parts of their bodies seem to change, and they seem to become something different and better. Going back to David Yarrow, this image tells a simple story, a mother's innate sense of protection for her youngster. And from there I jumped to Mack the Knife, of all people, written by Kurt Weill for his wife Lotte Lenya. And if you've never heard it, listen to this link which I got on Rich Wrap-Ups. It's really worth it. Mack the Knife, the ballad of Mack the Knife. Die Morität von Mackie Messer. Premiered in Berlin in 1928, and the music is so evocative. And the German is "Und der Haifisch, der hat Zähne," which means "and the shark, it has teeth." "Und die trägt im Gesicht," and it wears them in the face. "Und Macheath, der hat ein Messer," and Macheath, he has a knife. "Doch das Messer sieht man nicht," but the knife can't be seen. Then a few other quotes. "In the dark times will there also be singing?" Yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. And then this quote, which is pretty pertinent given what I wrote over the weekend: "It is easier to rob by setting up a bank than by holding up a bank clerk." Let's move on to political reflections. Dilma Rousseff has been impeached. This is big news. It's shades of grey rather than black and white, I'm afraid. Saudi Arabia's threat to sell off billions in American assets if 9/11 bill passes. And then I came across CBS News, which had the script, or talking about the script, of 28 pages. In 10 days, President Obama will visit Saudi Arabia at a time of deep mistrust between the two allies and lingering doubts about the Saudi commitment to fight violent Islamic extremism. It also comes at a time when the White House and intelligence officials are reviewing whether to declassify one of the country's most sensitive documents, known as the 28 pages. They have to do with 9/11 and the possible existence of a Saudi support network for the hijackers whilst they were in the US. The facts as presented are unbelievable, as were the facts as presented around the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And you just go to a number of issues. One building sort of collapsed from an explosion which could only have happened from inside the building. The attack on the Pentagon, there was no way the hole was commensurate with the hole that would have been created by an aircraft, amongst other issues. The Golan Heights will remain in Israel's hands forever, Netanyahu told his cabinet, which met for the first time on the Golan since the area was captured from Syria in a 1967 war and annexed in 1981 in a move that has not won international recognition. Hybrid wars, destabilizing scenarios, and colored revolutions, the Balkans, Chechnya, and the Central Asian Spring. This is a series of articles, very interesting, written about hybrid wars, saying that it was decided to commence a series of colored revolutions in the post-Soviet arena in order to box Russia in with a wall of pro-Western governments along the European periphery and threaten it with a chaotic space of disorder along the Central Asian periphery. Interesting piece in Foreign Affairs about the once and future superpower, why China won't overtake the United States. After 2.5 decades, the United States' run as a world superpower coming to an end, many say yes, seeing a rising China ready to catch up or even surpass the US in the near future. By many measures, after all, China's economy is on track to become the world's biggest, and even if its growth slows down, it will still outpace that of the United States for many years. Its coffers overflowing, Beijing has used its new wealth to attract friends, deter enemies, modernize its military, and aggressively assert sovereignty claims in its periphery. For many, therefore, the question is not whether China will become a superpower, but just how soon. And then it was basically saying that was not going to happen. And I take you back to December 2013 when I was writing about the pivot to Asia. I said, given that the trajectory is one of gradual erosion of that decisive US advantage, leads me to the view that the pivot to Asia has a logic and a momentum of its own. And I said, therefore, I see the US being increasingly determined to press its advantage. Before they are numbers, these people are human beings. That's the Pope. And Ai Weiwei then tweeted, we are all immigrants, we are all migrants, and posted a photograph of Pontifex. How many of you and your friends would leave Africa and go to Europe if you could get in legally? To Le Monde, they practically shouted, while they all raised their hands. I'm not a natural politician, Hillary Clinton confessed at a recent Democratic debate, in case you haven't noticed. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro 112.83, dollar index 94.71. Japanese yen has moved 80 ticks stronger, 107.96. US Treasury Secretary Jack Lew Friday called foreign exchange market moves orderly, a signal that the US doesn't view yen selling intervention as warranted. Swissy 0.9675, the pound 141.59, the Aussie 0.7666. Dropped 0.7%, set for the largest decline since April 7. India rupee 66.627, South Korean 111.5049, the Real 353.21, and obviously Dilma Rousseff is front and center. Egyptian pound 8.8838, but black market rate is considerably higher. South African rand 1465.33. Dollar index, I'll put up a one-year chart that's holding above 93, which, as I've said previously, is the key area of support. We hold above there, and then the long-term bull trend, I think, remains intact. Sterling, I'll put up a one-year chart, 141.59. 136.50, I think, is where we head to. But a lot depends on the vote, or the run-up to the vote, in the sense of which way it will go. The Canadian and Australian dollars dropped as crude tumbled after oil-producing nations failed to reach an accord to freeze output. The yen, of course, rose to a 17-month high. Commodity markets, gold is at 1235.85, 1250 area remains the key area. Have a look at this TwitPic from Holger showing the output of the various oil producers. You will notice that the big increase in production came out of the US. Kamal Santamaria yesterday, so much anticipation for one meeting which may not produce any great change in the oil market. It didn't. And here's a 3-day chart to show you how much it tumbled this morning. Brazilian real, I'll put up a 1-year chart, that's at 353.16. Obviously, a lot depends on how the situation plays out in Brazil. Argentina peso rallied hard on a Moody's upgrade. Again, thank you, Holger. Sub-Saharan Africa, I came across a transcript of the African Department press briefing, Washington, April 15. And Madame Antoinette Sayeh started with the opening remarks, and then she took some questions. After an extended period of strong economic growth, Sub-Saharan Africa is set to experience a second difficult year. Growth for the region as a whole fell to 3.5% in 2015, which was the lowest in some 15 years. And we project growth to be even slower this year at about 3%. GDP per capita growth will fall below 1%, something that has not happened since the late 1990s. To be sure, growth across the region is not uniformly effective. Most oil importers are generally faring quite well, with growth in excess of 5% or even a higher rate in countries such as Côte d'Ivoire, Kenya and Senegal, and many low-income countries. In most of these countries, growth is being supported by ongoing infrastructure investment efforts and strong private consumption. They are forecasting growth to slow further for the group of the region's oil exporters in 2016 to 2.5% from as much as 6% in 2014. Non-energy commodity exporters such as Ghana, South Africa and Zambia have also been hurt by the decline in commodity prices. Of course, Zambia staged a stunning rebound. Second for most of the region's frontier markets, external financing conditions have tightened substantially compared to the period until 2014, when they enjoyed ample access to global liquidity. Third, several southern and eastern African countries, including Ethiopia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, are suffering from a severe drought that is putting millions of people at risk of food insecurity. They're asking for a substantial policy reset, saying it's critical in many countries of the region. Reset is urgent, as the policy response to date has generally been insufficient. In commodity exporting countries, fiscal and foreign reserves are depleting rapidly. Financing is constrained. Consequently, commodity exporters should respond to the lower export earnings and budgetary revenues promptly and robustly to prevent a disorderly adjustment, which is what I think we're going to have in Nigeria. Finally, I'd like to close by providing an update on Mozambique, given recent press reports about the existence of new loan transactions associated with the security and defense sectors. We have received confirmation this week from the authorities of the existence of a large amount of borrowing that had not been previously disclosed to the IMF. The undisclosed borrowing exceeds $1 billion and significantly changes our assessment of Mozambique's macroeconomic outlook. Talking about Angola, saying this is one of the economies that is hit very badly. Angolans have pursued efforts to adjust to that stock, still more work to be done given the magnitude of this shock. They said they've made a formal request to the IMF for a 3-year program under the Extended Fund Financing Facility, in the process of beginning discussions. Then talking about Nigeria, saying, as you'll see in the Article 4 report that we discussed in some detail, given the fact that those restrictions are at odds with Nigeria's commitments as an IMF member country, in terms of exchange rate restrictions, we hope that those restrictions can be eliminated and that Nigeria can move to a more flexible management of exchange rates. And then she concluded by saying that our estimate of growth was only 3.5% in 2015, and they're expecting just 3% in 2016. Interesting article also in the Wall Street Journal about IMF suspending lending to Mozambique. Said it had stopped a $55 million disbursement to Mozambique after it became aware of the unreported loans made by Credit Suisse Group AG and VTB Group of Russia. IMF had approved in December $283 million rescue loan package for Mozambique. Credit Suisse spokesman declined to comment. VTB and Mozambique officials could be immediately reached to comment. We want this hanky-panky business to go away, Ms. Lagarde said. And I'll put up a photograph I took 688 days ago when I was in Maputo for a jointly held conference between the government of Mozambique and the IMF. It was called Africa Rising, and I couldn't help but tweet and say, not in the float all boats way it was in 2012 and 2013. But look how times have changed. And I also took this photograph of the evening as it fell across Maputo on June the 3rd, 2014. Finance Minister Adriano Meliani was quoted by the state news agency on Sunday saying the country had no hidden loans. There was some confusion which has ended up creating problems for Mozambique groundlessly, he said. The international community will realize that firstly, Mozambique is a country that has never failed to pay. And secondly, we honor our commitments, he said. China and Africa, this is The Economist, a despot's guide to foreign aid. Want more cash? Vote with China at the UN. Very interesting correlation. Greek Machar is expected to arrive in Juba. He's expected in Juba today to form the transitional unity government with President Salva Kiir. So let's see how that develops. The South African all-share is up 4.63% year to date. Dollar Rand 14.65 level, Salsamol. Egyptian EGX 30 up 7.29% year to date. Nigeria has not applied for an IMF loan because it is not sick, said the finance minister. One seasoned investor puts it, Nigeria, with the help from South Africa, is killing the African story. That's in the FT. This week, China has offered help with a currency swap and the promise of $6 billion in infrastructure loans. The terms of these deals are not yet clear, but they could go some way towards plugging an $11 billion budget deficit. The danger is that, together with the modest rise in oil prices, China's help will encourage Mr. Buhari to defer the tough decisions once again. PZ Customs pays a 70% premium for dollars in Nigeria on shortage, so it's gone right through the economy. Whilst the official Naira exchange rate continues to be stable, a lack of availability at that rate is resulting in the majority of dollars being purchased at a premium of 50 to 70%. The resultant cost impact is being managed through changes to relative pricing in an environment where trading conditions remain challenging. The situation in Nigeria remains extremely fluid. The Nigerian all-share is down 13.7% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange down 5.33% this year. Rest in peace, Malik Sidibe, 1936 to 2016, extraordinary photographer, chronicler of African contemporary life. Moissel from 1974, pretty remarkable. Ami des Espagnols, 1968 as well, both very strong and evocative photographs. Narcotics in Africa, an emerging drug market, is what The Economist is saying in the early morning at a bar in Nairobi. Electronic beats pumped from a DJ on a stage, shielded from the autumn rains under tarpaulins. A substantial crowd, mostly young Kenyans, but several European and American expats, dancers. Outside the women's toilets, attendants turn their eyes away in exchange for a tip as groups of young people go in together, then wander out, wiping their noses. The drug scene is not entirely new to Nairobi. There's been cocaine here since I was 14 years old, says one young Kenyan woman. Just talking about what's happening and saying that there's as much cocaine consumed in West Africa as in Europe, which I find quite extraordinary. My piece of the weekend, Chase Bank and the story of the three wise monkeys, Mizaru, Kikazaru, and Iwazaru. The situation in the banking sector remains fluid and fast-moving. The central bank governor held a presser Friday, and I relied on a fellow called Dan Mwangi for the following tweets from that presser. Jurogi. If we had to move forward past the tipping point into the new normal, this had to happen. If auditors see large differences in a bank's books, they are required by law to report to the CBK. Chase Bank's auditors did that. People were having less confidence in their banks, and the storm was waiting for Monday when bank doors would be opened to erupt. The announcement of CBK's new funding facility calmed the storm, and it was visible when we looked at the numbers on Monday. Jurogi, it's not a loan, it's not a credit, not a bailout. It's the Central Bank of Kenya that decides when to come in. No bank apparently has drawn down on the facility yet, and they wouldn't, because essentially the moment you do that, it seems to me that you've lost control. You've handed it over to the central bank. Insider lending calls to question the governance of the institution. A bank is not a mama boga. 5 suitors lined up to buy Chase Bank. They're going to have to probably go the route of a good bank, bad bank in order to offend Sayeh. Chase Bank was the 11th largest at the time it was placed into receivership on April 7, shortly after announcing restated earnings with a qualified audit opinion, Deloitte, which was deliberately miniaturized in the restated earnings release. Mr. Kabui said in his statement to the police that the so-called insider loans were assets held in Chase Iman's joint ventures financed under Musharaka. The pertinent question to ask Mr. Kabui and his board is when these assets were classified as Musharaka. The entire tale that has been spun took me back to the story of the 3 wise monkeys. The 3 together they embodied the proverbial principle: see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. The 3 monkeys are Mizaru, covering his eyes, who sees no evil; Kikazaru, covering his ears, who hears no evil; and Iwazaru, covering his mouth, who speaks no evil. You have to ask yourself, what is the duty of a board? Was there a functioning board at Chase Bank, or even at Imperial Bank, or just a Mizaru, Kikazaru, and Iwazaru? Where was the credit committee, dishing out 84.96% of your core capital on an unsecured basis to an insider, surely to pass through some sort of process? Because if it didn't, then, as Patrick Jurogi said, Chase Bank was a mama boga and not a bank. Where was the internal audit division? It's a case of rot at the top and abuse of privilege. That's Kato Mukuru, head of equity research at Exotics, told Bloomberg. It's not a crisis, it's a governance issue. The truth is that the last line of defense is the external auditor, and Deloitte are to be commended for calling a spade a spade. The calculation has entirely changed for audit companies the world over. KPMG threw the Guptas over because of the reputational risk. Deloitte could not put their name to a cockamamie, ridiculous, pointless, or nonsensical, full of wild schemes, and cockamamie ideas story. Chase Bank risks 600 million shillings invested in a cash call last year. Disclosures carried in a credit rating note of the bank by Global Credit Rating Company last year showed the bank raised 600 million through expanding its employee share ownership plan, around the time it was carrying out a rights issue which raised 1.6 billion shillings. Bank's biggest shareholders include Amethyst Finance, German fund DEG, European Investment Bank, and Zurich-based asset management firm Responsibility Participations AG. Nation FM tweeted, Jubilee rally at Afraha took place. William Ruto said the era of poll violence is over. Harrods tweeted, we've received some inquiries regarding a Harrods store in Kenya. We can confirm that it's not an official store. Put up a photograph of it. And another photograph of Kigali Road, Nairobi in 1975. Jamia Mosque can be seen in the background. Genghis Capital staff launch its units trust fund in April 2013. Let me put up that photograph. You can see Zaf Khan in that photo. Nairobi All Shares up 0.26% this year. NSE 20 down 2.99% this year. And let me leave you with France 24, tracking elephants as new railway cuts through Kenya. Once again, thank you for stopping by. Wishing you a tremendous week.